Welcome everyone to this Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host Tom Dillon. This has been recorded live at our Tin Pot Mobile studio and broadcast around the world. Today's topic is Design That Sells, How Smart Spaces Boost Buyer Appeal and Profit with Siobhan Casey. Now, before we start, I'd just like to say by way of a disclaimer that today is a wonderful discussion, but that nothing said here constitutes financial advice. You should always take professional advice before investing your hard-earned cash. There may be the odd unplanned swear word along the way as well. The format for today is that me and Siobhan will probably just have a chat with some exciting bits and pieces thrown in, but yeah, we'll mostly just do it as a chat, I think. With regards, Siobhan, bit of an intro. Siobhan Casey is an award-winning interior designer and founder of Casey and Fox. For more than 15 years, she has worked with homeowners, developers and contractors to create homes that are practical, desirable and memorable for all the right reasons. She'll be sharing some of the design lessons that she's learnt from walking through hundreds of homes. I've walked through hundreds of homes, but I haven't got any design tips. But anyway, fortunately, that's why Siobhan's here, including the details that buyers notice and the ones developers often overlook. Oh, Siobhan.
Hi there, how you doing?
Very well indeed. How are you?
Very well. I'm looking forward to the summer heat wave that we've got here in the UK coming this week.
Yeah, I noticed. I think I saw on the BBC it's all doom and desperate and take care. But everyone I speak to is like, I'm really looking forward to this. It should be nice.
Anything is
Uh,
possible when the weather is good.
it's right, isn't it? A bit of sunshine in your life, bit of sunshine in your heart. It's all good stuff. So why don't we start at the beginning? Obvious place to begin. How did you get into? Which wrong turn took you into interior design, and how did you get started, and what's what's the backstory here?
Thanks very much for having me on today's podcast. I'm really quite excited about it, really.
Mm.
I have been on building sites since I was a kid, to be honest. I think one of my little friends, when I was about 5, her dad was a builder, and so I've been walking around building sites, and I've always been very comfortable. When I was in high school, I took, I think you call it, I took technical drawing. I know there's another
Mm.
name over here, but I did technical drawing all the way through to A levels. My brain just works in that 3D manner.
Mm.
And so I actually wanted to become an architect for many years.
Mm.
However, studying to be an architect in South Africa, I'm actually from Botswana, but I went to school in
Mm.
South Africa.
Okay.
And when I was studying many moons ago, it was really, really hard and really expensive. So I
Mm.
had to put things on hold for a bit and I went traveling around the world. I ended up working in a completely different industry for a number of years until I discovered that actually I really wanted to get into the construction and design industry. And I quit my job and I went knocking on doors, basically said, "Hi, I'll do anything. I just want to be inside this world, and I'll make the tea and sweep the floors." And I did this for about 6 weeks, and I had a Friday where I had 3 job interviews, and I got offered all 3 jobs, which was great.
Wow.
And I ended up working with a conservation architectural firm for some time, and I loved it. And they taught me how to be very organized, and but they were very black and white about things. There was no shades of grey. And then I got headhunted to go and work for a bigger architectural firm, and they had just won the project for the Abu Dhabi airport. And I
Mm.
was the project administrator on that, and I did that for about 4 years, I think. My memory is a bit blurry now. And I loved it. We had a really big team. We had 75 architects on the project at that time.
Wow.
It was fantastically interesting. We were doing all sorts of things, and there was a real camaraderie with the group. You know, you could stand up at lunchtime and say, "Right, who wants to go to Wagamama's?" And 17 people would you stand up, and we'd all troop off to Wagamama's. It was great. However, the hours were long, unbelievably long. Midnight was an early night most of the time.
Wow.
Uh, when we had deadlines, if you go to bed, you get home at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes, sleep for a few hours and turn around and get back in. And I kind of realized I had a light bulb moment that if I was working that hard for someone else, why wasn't I working that hard for myself?
Mm.
So I decided that at that point I knew that architecture is probably 5% design and 95% admin and
Mm.
planning commissions and client liaison and so on. And when you're doing big commercial projects, you've got committee level, another committee, and so on and so on. And it's really quite hard to develop personal relationships with the people who are your clients. Sometimes you might never meet them. So I decided that I wanted to change careers, and I went to a couple of open evenings. I did a bit of research on where to study, and I went back to college.
Mm.
I think I was in my late 20s, early 30s, somewhere around there. And I did a diploma at the KLC School of Design, and it was in Chelsea back then, but they've moved over and they're part of West Dean College now. And I loved it. And that was me getting into interiors.
Mm.
Again, I think I did my last year of studies. I took a sabbatical from my job. I was working full time and studying full time all through that. So I had no personality. My husband was throwing M&Ms at me from a distance, wondering if it was safe to come close. And then I decided I was actually going to try and get into the interiors world after I graduated. And I approached my bosses and asked them if I could move into the design world. Unfortunately, well, fortunately for them, they had just won another airport project, and I knew that and they wanted me to go and work on that one. And I just thought, if I'm going to stay with them, as much as I enjoyed the company, I'm going to be pigeonholed, and I'm only ever going to work on airports because that's what happens in that world. So I quit my job with no other job to go to, and my husband's going, "What are you doing?"
Is he still throwing M&Ms at this point, or is he?
And then I worked as an intern for several amazing companies, and I learned about the interior design business and how it is very different to the architectural world. There's all shades of grey, whereas our architecture is very black and white. And I loved it. And I fast forward a little bit, I formed my company, and yeah, 14, 15 years later, here I am.
Well, that's an excellent little canter through what you've been doing. The 75 architects on one job, like that blows my mind. Obviously, you're going to need more than one when you're doing airports, right? I get it, but that seems like a lot. And my experience of working with architects, by the way, mostly positive, but is that it would be a bit herding cats, wouldn't it? You said it was a great team. That surprised me. But then you think, well, these are experienced professionals, but at that point you'd need to have almost I'm picturing like a military hierarchical structure when you have head architect and sub architects of people, so that everyone knows whose final decision everything is. Is that roughly how it goes?
Exactly, yeah, pretty much exactly like that. So there was a lead designer, and his name is Mustafa Shahabuddin,
Right.
a very talented architect. We got along like a house on fire. And then the lead project manager is a very talented man called Jens Hardvendal. And they're still part of KPF, which is the architectural firm. And they were my direct bosses. And then I was the project administrator for the project. And we had a really good dynamic. There was at the start of the project, there was another lady, Jennifer, and I forget her last name at the moment, but this is 20 years ago, forgive me.
Sure. I think she'll forgive you.
She had worked on the Dulles Airport in Washington, and they had a very strict structure of project information. And so she came in and she was basically teaching us how to do all the structure, and it was amazing. But you had to be militant about document filing and making sure that the entire team knew that they were expected to follow that procedure and protocol and whatnot. And 99% of the time, the team, fell into line, and they understood that they needed to save things and track documents and whatnot, because the information flow was unreal. It was just unreal.
In terms of the amount of information required to successfully build out an international airport.
There were 22 different consultant companies, people who were doing the landscape architecture, the wayfinding signage, there was a museum, so there was a design just for the museum, people who were designing the ceiling tiles, people who were designing the flooring, the escalators, the lifts. There was a separate consultant company for every single discipline in that building.
Yeah, and then you needed the information to be in the hands of the right person at the right time.
And being tracked, And what is the most up to date? And and there's some interesting stories I could tell you off camera.
No, sure. Like I picture, the stuff my business partner have done of building like 4 and 5 flats out, and that feels complicated. And then you realise, you obviously nothing compared to what other companies are doing. But then we didn't have 75 architects, so different scale of job, isn't it? So then, as you say, you moved over into Interior design, I'm always, cautious about I don't want to use the wrong words. But anyway, so roughly speaking, interior design for the last 15 years, and I'm guessing that also encompasses a pretty wide variety of projects in that sort of time. What kind of things you've been working on?
Golly, what kind of things have I been working on? So,
Is it easy to answer what kind of things have you not been working on?
I've done a variety of things. In terms of commercial projects, I worked with another interior designer, and well, he was an interior decorator actually. He sort of fell into um, the 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 industry, and he was very,
Mm.
very creative. And his name was David, and we worked on a boutique hotel in Vienna. And
Wow.
that was really interesting. The woman who owned the hotel was an incredibly business savvy woman, and she had bought this hotel together with her father, if I'm remembering that correctly. And they had 4 floors, but it was in typical Viennese architecture. It was very Palladian, very pastel
Mm.
colors. Loads and loads of hotels in Vienna look the same. There's
Mm.
not a lot of unique or originality, or there wasn't back then. And it was her wish to make her hotel stand out and be unique and have people come to the hotel as an experience when coming into Vienna. And
Mm.
so she had the funding, and we built up 2 floors.
Mm.
We had permission, and we built up 2 floors, and we actually created unique spaces. So every room in the hotel was an entirely unique experience. So it was like stepping inside the inside of a jewelry box.
No, wow.
So, so she could charge different rates for these rooms because they were special. And by
Mm.
that, she was building up the funds to redo the rest of the hotel. So I think she was very clever. One of these people that could, see 7, 8, 9 steps ahead. It was fantastic. In terms of other commercial projects, I did a tattoo parlor in Kingston, which was good fun. One of the top 3 tattoo parlors in London.
Wow.
They have a waiting list. Basically, this is a high-end place. They
Right.
have 16 rooms, I think, off the top of my head.
Jeez.
They do tattoo removals and whatnot, and it was a nightclub. So if anyone's heard of the Fighting Cocks over in Kingston and the Old London Road tattoos, that's one of ours. That was really good fun, and I did that project because I knew the clients well. I'd actually designed their house for them. They had a beautiful Art Deco house as well.
Mm.
So in terms of variety, yeah. And then I've worked on a beach house in West Wittering. That was humongous. That was lovely because the clients were really quite keen to pay homage to the previous historical architecture of the old building, which was torn down. And then we did a new modern arts and crafts version of the building, which was really good fun. Victorian houses in Belsize Crescent. Arts and crafts houses over in Beckenham. So yeah, my work is predominantly UK based, but all sorts of manner of architectural styles and whatnot.
Yeah, it sounds like the job in I can't Venice. Was it Venice or Vienna?
Vienna,
Vienna. I
Vienna.
used to get those mixed up with the spellings. But Vienna, like, is a great opportunity to go and have a few nights away, as
Oh, it
well
was
as do
divine,
some
yeah.
work.
And yeah, the
um,
flea markets in Vienna are divine. If anybody wants to do that, just go for it.
Yeah, there you go. So that might be our first useful tip for the listeners. But we'll try and pay some more homage to the listeners as we go through. But right now, I'm just chatting away things I find interesting, and hopefully other people will too, in my usual way. Tattoo parlor. I want to go touch back on that. I mean, I could go and check the website, and maybe I will after I finish recording this. But what does I've no tattoos. What does the inside of a good looking? How do you design a tattoo parlor? I'm picturing a lot of pictures of tattoos, but my guess is it's not nearly that simple.
So it has to be sterile where they're actually doing the tattoos. It has to be
Mm,
completely sterile. It has to be treated like a hospital environment, really.
right.
There has to be management of the shops and needles and
Mm,
things like that, and management of the waste. For this particular project, we had to design a new built staircase because the historical or existing the property footprint as existing, there was the nightclub on the ground floor. There's a pub and a
mm,
nightclub called the Fighting Cocks. And then there was an internal staircase that went up to the first floor, and the first floor and the second floor were being used by the bar staff. So it was in an
Right.
interesting state, shall we say.
Yeah.
So they used to live on site and they'd done that for decades. People just used to come
Wow.
and go as the bar staff. And then the loft was completely chocker full of all the party equipment. So leftover musical equipment from gigs, Halloween costumes, all the decorative stuff that the nightclub used to use at different types of the year. So that was a complete dumping ground. And the only existing staircase wasn't compliant. So we actually had
Mm.
to build a slightly new building outside, joining and doing a new staircase up, which was compliant as well. So that was one of the trickiest things. The other tricky element was the architect who the client had used, who to do the planning permission for the building and whatnot.
Mm.
I looked at the drawings and I said, I don't think they've done this right. And they hadn't dropped the floor level. So if you on the first floor, all the ceilings were super tall.
Right.
Second floor ceilings were put 2.4. But we wanted to go into the loft, and there was not enough standing height in the loft, so we actually had to drop the floor slash ceiling of the first floor to be able to create enough head height. But they hadn't done it
Gotcha.
as any of the plan of it as part of any of the planning permission applications. So we
Wow.
had to go reapply for this again, and I just couldn't believe, something so simple that had been missed. So that
That's
was something
that's
else.
pretty basic, that, isn't it? It's amazing what
Well,
stuff gets missed, isn't it?
yeah, I have an eye for detail. I'm afraid that my clients love it, but the builders hate it because I can spot something that's not right. I'm
Mm.
at a quite a distance.
Sure, sure, sure. And then in terms of, so that's all the kind of the fabric of it, but then what does, as you say, a high-end tattoo parlor, so that's not just gonna, you're gonna want that to really pop. And so from an interior, I imagine, from an
So
interior design perspective, that's got to be a challenge in a one that, like I imagine a lot of these things, if you get them right, it's got to be really quite pleasing, I imagine. But what kind of design did you go for? Is that difficult to summarize in a few sentences?
no, not at all. I proposed three different design schemes to the client because that's what we
Mm,
normally do. We provide different atmospheres
ideas.
and whatnot. And we ended up going with a scheme that was described as a Victorian gentleman's club. So
Ah,
old,
wow.
yeah, old vintage opulent furniture, bright colors, using lots of wood where possible, where it didn't have
Mm,
to be super ultra sterile. Using old vintage lights. We actually went to the clients and I went to a lot of antiques fairs and we'd hunt
mm,
around for vintage lights that we could put on the wall. The clients had traveled a lot and they had some vintage artwork that we could put on the wall, like old Japanese fans, which looked amazing. So
wow.
it was all about bringing character and personality and making people feel welcome no matter where they came from.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Before we start hit record, you mentioned you've also I don't know what the right word is for this. Designed designed a panic room or involved in a panic room type of project. I was fascinated 'cause I thought once you've got a panic room, you just kind of want it grey, don't you? I'm picturing military grey, a seat in the corner, a few tins of beans or whatever you have in a panic room, and then that's it. But maybe not for for the people you were working for.
Um, yeah, this was a surprise request from a client. I did look at him twice when he asked me about this. I'm going,
Sure.
what do you think's going to happen? What do I not know about
yeah,
exactly?
yeah, yeah. I've
Um,
been watching the news, but have I missed something? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, a panic room. Basically, he wanted his wife and kids this particular client was thinking about taking their company public, and that they were going
Mm,
to be under the microscope for various reasons. And so he wanted his wife and kids to be able to retreat if their house ever got breached. There were a lot of security measures that we actually took in place in this house. Things like fog cannons. I don't know if you've heard of a fog cannon.
no, I mean just the words. I can probably guess. It feels like one I could probably work out, but I've not heard the phrase before. No.
Yeah, basically, if security is breached, so we did all sorts of security implements, which I won't talk about here. People can contact me directly if they want to have a chat.
Sure.
But basically, a fog cannon is something that it's a tiny little canister that can sit either behind a wall void. There's a tiny little nozzle that pokes through. So you try and put it somewhere discreetly. It can sit in the ceiling void as well. But if there's an intruder and an alarm is depressed or panic button is pressed, then fog mist, a really dense mist, is descended, and it basically is aimed at slowing the person down, slowing the burglar
Mm.
down. So we had
Yeah.
to implement things like that, and talk about how we hide everything, because this was an extremely high-end house. How do we make it
Yeah.
discreet? How do we make it, because the little nozzle can actually get quite hot, so we don't want
Okay.
kids to be able to accidentally burn themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, the panic room, it needs plumbing, believe it or not. That's not concrete walls, yes, but plumbing, because you don't know how long you'll be in the room, and
Yeah.
water is almost more important than cans of beans and a loo, and you need to be able to contact the outside world and whatnot. So that's something, and that you have to think about. Do you have a separate system that's completely separate from everything else? So, and how do
Mm.
you provide the water supply for that?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Also, maybe if you've got a big house, it's not such a big problem. But the panic room isn't going to get used that often, is it? You're not going to be like bringing your guests in. Hey, have a look at this. You can't show it off and
No,
whatnot.
yeah.
So,
That can
so
be
as a
really
result,
tiny. That can be
yeah, I was
really
going to say
tiny.
it's
Yeah.
pretty small, isn't it? Because the chances are you'll be in there for hours rather than days or weeks or months, right?
Well, we hope, yeah.
Yeah, right. All being well. Okay, great. So that with the I find it incredibly fun stuff out the way. How can we help? Maybe, and I'm not trying to pretend I know our listeners here because I definitely don't. But if I did know our listeners, my guess is that they're either people who are just vaguely interested in what's going on in the property world, or perhaps more usefully, people who are like myself in my business, developing out, refurbing or building. I'm not building, but some of our listeners might be out into the sky, new units, yeah, refurbished units, and they're thinking at the end of it, Christ, I wish I'd used an interior designer because these look either the same as everyone else's or just bad. So, what? I suppose. Well, I'll try to avoid asking a two-part question. Instead, I'll ask them in sequence because if it's anything, I'll then forget the second part is. So, first part is: has much changed in your long experience of doing this? As in,
Yeah. Mm.
is it just fashions that have changed? And oh, it used to be blue, now it's green, or is it more than that? Is it to do with what people want, or is it just the whole science of it's changed? What's changed in the time you've been doing this, if anything?
I love that question, actually. I think I don't get asked that enough.
Mm,
Um, Quite a few things have changed. I mean, when I started out, we were just coming out of the 2008 financial recession, and things were tight, but the rich were still spending. You know,
mm, mm.
they weren't even shy about dropping £250,000 on just decoration, not even any actual structural work or anything like that.
Right.
Um, People are very cautious about spending now. I
Mm,
think that people are more savvy. We've got more information on the internet now than ever before. There's Pinterest, there's Instagram, there's all these social media platforms, these influencers that are showing how they live, and people can see aspirational ideas in front of them now more than ever before. When I started out, again, I'm probably showing my age here, but Instagram didn't exist.
sure.
So I think that in terms of what's changed, I think there are a couple things that I think people think about in terms of the property. Property developers want a property to be financially, economically viable.
Mm,
This is their business. They want it to be successful. They
yeah.
understand, property developers understand planning. They understand the build costs. They liaise with the architects. They understand GDV. But I think sometimes something that gets missed along the way is for developers actually thinking how buyers live, and how we live is what I think has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. People used to buy a home and flip it really quickly. They'd live in it, paint it up, maybe do a loft conversion, and then 3 years later they'd move on to something else. And that was big in the 90s and the 2000s and whatnot. It was even big probably up until 2015. But then, later on, people started to be a little bit more cautious, 2018, 2019. And then in 2020, we had COVID and no one was moving anywhere for 2 years. Now we're out of COVID, but I think that there's something that governments are not talking about, particularly the UK government, is just how stagnant the property market is here at the moment. The market's saturated. For every buyer that is looking for a house, there are 30, 40 houses that they can look at. And I know that from personal experience from trying to sell a property. It's been impossible. I think that people are staying longer, where they are. They're trying to figure out how they can adapt their home. And I think what property developers probably need to think about now is how they can just tweak their mindset about making a property as attractive from a longevity point of view as possible. So not just looking at the quick flip, but actually looking at how people are living, how people's from an anthropological and a society point of view, their needs have changed. You know, you might have a couple who historically you'd have a couple in their late 20s,
Mm.
move in, paint it, flip it, leave there, maybe have one baby, and then decide it's too small, move out onto a bigger place. And so the cycle would be. Now they can't afford to move. Mortgages are really high, interest rates are high. They're
Mm.
having to stay in that property for 10 years, maybe 15 years. Nearly all of my clients, I mean, I spoke to a client on Thursday last week. They'd been in their property for 38 years. We bought our current home from people who'd lived here for 40 years. Nearly, and I'm the new kid on the block. I've only lived in my house for 3 years, and everyone else around me has been there 15, 20 years at least. They're still considered new kids on the block.
Right.
So I think that people are staying where they are. So it is that much harder for property developers. And I think there just needs to be the change that I think needs to happen is thinking about designing clever properties that look at the longevity of living within that space.
All right, so let's say I think it's an excellent point or points. So if someone's developing out, say, an old building into five two-bed apartments, what does that how does what you've said, and of course it's just an example, but how would that potentially impact the kind of thing they're looking at if they're thinking, well, people who buy these units might be staying for a long time rather than a short time.
Clever storage because people have stuff.
Mm.
The best developments are where I think was when someone has thought about how people live and has either allowed for or put in the actual storage solutions that they're going to need. So there's nothing worse than moving into a development. And I walked into a warehouse development that had been converted into two penthouses in was it Lewisham a few years back.
Mm.
Not a single bit of storage, not one cupboard. And I'm just, where do you put your winter coats? Where do you put your ski gear or
Mm.
sporting things? You know, the hockey sticks. So thinking about the storage, I think, is really key. Whether you might have a couple in their 20s who move in. One of them might work from home and they use the second bedroom as a work from home office slash guest room.
Yeah.
Then maybe they have a kid at some point and that room has to now multitask guest room, baby room, home office. So maybe thinking about, this is an example. I had a bachelor who approached me. He had bought a rather big one bedroom apartment, but he worked from home a lot. He was in IT and he
Mm.
didn't want his office space to be either in the living room or in his bedroom. So we luckily the place was actually quite big and we partitioned a little office area out of the corridor before the bedroom. We moved the bedroom wall and actually made the bedroom a little bit smaller so he could have a separate office space. So making a home as adaptable and flexible as possible goes a long way to allow people to stay there longer.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Um, and then okay, so I've listened to this, and I'm just thinking about mythical. Our listeners now thinking, yeah, well, this sounds good. So probably, I'm guessing that a lot of I was going to say a lot of what I can probably guess a lot of what you do, and that's absolutely not true. I can only guess that you help people with this kind of problem, but I'm hopeless at all this, as I think a lot of developers are. Some aren't, by the way. Again, speaking to our listeners here, some are amazing, but many are hopeless, and I know I definitely am. So when if somebody was interested in engaging your service, and we'll come on to in a second, because I know you've got a new thing where a newish thing, I think, where you're helping people more and more online these days, which is kind of convenient and handy. So everyone's busy and no one can be asked with more or less anything. So online sounds great. But were you to come into the space or do it online, where do you start from? What's your process, or how are you going to help me as a developer with my mythical block of my new development of 5 two-bed apartments that I want to make sure they maybe get the highest sale price or the most useful for tenants, depending on what I'm going to do with the block? How does that work? What does it look like?
So the first thing they do is send me floor plans. So
Mm.
existing versus proposed floor plans.
Yeah.
And the developer typically talks me through about what they want to do, what they want to achieve. We look at the location, what sort of yield are they hoping to achieve, how long do they think the property might be on the market for, what conversations they've had with the estate agents or if they're marketing directly. And then I would say, right, well, I think you could maybe make this particular space your showroom flat or the standout flat. There's always a master apartment, isn't there? The sort of the
Mm.
best one with the best views or the best layout space or the best access, or maybe it's got a little garden terrace or a roof terrace even.
Yeah.
Looking at how to make one particular space or more a bit special, looking at how we can be clever with the space. So sometimes you can make a bedroom a little bit smaller and squeeze in something else that's helpful, like a walk-in shower or an ensuite, and looking at what that does to the bottom line in terms of the budget. But I think in terms of working with developers, the biggest thing that I would like to ask is that please bring people on at the start and not at the end. I've had a number of developers ring me up and go, "Oh, the building's all finished. Yep, everything's been painted, the flooring's down, the second fix is done. We've just got to get the garden done. Can you come and have a look and just make it pretty?" And I'm going, it's too late. And I had this actually happen last year where there was a developer who built a rather big block of apartments in Purley, which is South London.
Mm.
And it was on a tricky road, to be fair. He'd arranged parking on the site, which was good. But there were so many things I was just going, I wish you'd actually spoken to me just even 6 months ago, because radiators were in the wrong position. For example, the principal bedroom, the radiator was on the only wall that any wardrobes could go. Why would you put the radiator there? You could put it on a different wall. Just there were French doors opening onto
Mm.
a Juliet balcony, but no other ventilation.
Oh,
There
wow.
was no, and for a woman on a first floor apartment, that's a big deal. You want to be able to open a window and not have to open French doors to get some air in. So the
Yeah.
principal bedroom was so stuffy in the summertime. Unless you opened the French doors, there was no air coming into the space. Um, they hadn't. They'd compromised too much on the size of the bedroom,
Mm.
and by that I mean you walked directly into it. The double bed was immediately there, and there was no bedside tables because there was not enough room because the radiator had been put in the wrong location. So the only place that the developer could put wardrobes were these 1970s style up and over wardrobes that went over the bed.
Oh,
No
wow.
one's done that since the 80s, I don't think. So this principal bedroom therefore looked really cramped and quite cave-like rather than feeling luxurious and spacious. I'm just going, conversation 6 months ago would have just moved the radiator, put the wardrobes on the other wall, and things would have looked a lot better. And maybe add a window in. So yeah, I've lost track of what we're talking about now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's all right. I think that's good. I think when we're both completely lost track of where we are, we know we're doing something right. Um, yeah. So those are the kind of things you'd help people with, and as you're saying, your main thing you'd like to stress is to get in touch with you earlier rather than
Earlier, that's
later
right.
would be handy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and then um, now it's my turn for my brain to go blank. While I try and work out what the heck I was going to ask, was why don't instead you fill the space by telling us a bit more about the things you've been doing recently? I think you were telling me a little bit about before we recorded around. You had some nice fancy terms for essentially, I think, helping people more online, doing more online Zoom type sessions. And I think I'm guessing a bit here, but would be of interest to probably quite a lot of our listeners. So why don't you tell us a bit more about that and how that works and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on the big projects and building sites for on and off for the last 20 years. I have started diversifying as of a year ago, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I started doing a online session called the Build Survival Session, which is an online consultation held over Zoom or Teams or whatever platform is easier for the client. This came about because a builder approached me. They were working on a project in Southwest London and Twickenham. The clients were first-time renovators. They were quite well off, but they were not making decisions quick enough because they were getting stuck and they were becoming like a deer in the headlights and they did not know what they needed to feed back to. And the builders were going, Siobhan, because the builder knew me, And he took me aside and he just said, look, can you please come and help these clients? Just a couple of hours consultation. They don't necessarily feel that they need the full-on design service. And I said, that's fine. But just give them some advice, because we are running behind now. We need to order the radiators, the underfloor heating, and so on and so on. And they're worrying about the paint colors. And we don't need to know paint colors now. We need to order radiators because they're on a 6-week lead time. And so the builders actually asked me to provide this to clients. And this took off last year because the builders ended up what do you call it? White labeling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is that the right term? I can't think.
I think
And basically, yeah, so I provided design services to their clients, which I was really happy to do. It's not a problem. It's good fun. I like meeting people, and you can tell I can probably talk to anyone. And then I developed something called the design hotline, which is really about one room, one issue. Let's just get it sorted. And this has been actually quite popular. So I had a client from South Africa who got in touch about a house that she was living in, but she wanted to Airbnb and she didn't know anything about it. And she just wanted some quick design advice about how to dress the master bedroom, which was her bedroom, to make it user-friendly for guests and whatnot. I had another client who is an English expat based in Singapore. She had a rental property and she signed a lease for 2 years. She'd been living in Singapore for 6 years. She didn't want to spend a lot of money on the apartment because it wasn't hers, so to speak, but she wanted it to feel more like hers. And her bedroom was colossal. Her bedroom was bigger than the footprint of my house. So, we were looking at zoning and just creating different atmosphere, different areas for exercise and meditation, different areas for sleeping, different areas for storage, and just gentle partitions, things that didn't require full-on construction. So you'd be amazed at what you can discuss in an hour on Zoom. You can fly through various things. I had another client who was actually living in Singapore, but then she had a house in Brisbane, and she was moving back to Brisbane after a number of years because her kids were going back to going to high school. And she had a master en suite, and she had a bungalow house, and the master en suite actually doubled as a utility room, which opened out to the outside, just the layout of the house. And she didn't want it to feel too utilitarian. So we were looking at the layout and how to change a few things around and how to partition it and just talk through, and I ended up sending her tiles and grouts from suppliers in Australia. So the world of being online is so much smaller, and you can find suppliers. And I should have been a researcher. If I wasn't an interior designer, I should have been a researcher, because I can find anything.
Right. How big was this lady with a large bedroom? How many meters square was her bedroom?
Oh golly, if I say this this bedroom must have been 18 meters long by about maybe 10 meters wide. It was huge, and there was a balcony. Yeah.
It's like I've not got great eyesight. If I open the door and the bed's at the far end, I'm like, is that a bed? You know what I mean? It's going to be that is this. What on earth's any developer doing building a bedroom that size? Or did it start life as a warehouse and then it was converted into a bedroom?
Good point. Yeah, I've stayed in a bedroom though once like that. I was on holiday in was it Madeira? No, Montenegro, and the hotel bedroom was colossal. I was like, I could run around in here and get a swim.
You wonder whether it was a typo, don't you? Like the developer's going, no, was it 18 or 180? No, I think it was 180 meters. We wanted this bedroom. Yeah, that's right. And then they get there. Oh no, it's not right. A bit late now, isn't it? Got an apartment in this bedroom. That's quite a challenge, isn't it? My bedroom's 180 meters in size. What am I going to do with all the space in there? Because it feels a bit. Currently, I've got a bedside table and a wardrobe, and there's still a lot left over. So yeah, I can see why that would need a bit of. You want at least a yoga mat or two in there, or something, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify, I did say 18, not 180. Yeah.
No, sure. But
yeah.
I'm not pulling you up on the details, but it was 18 meters long. By like 10 meters across. That's 180 meters squared, right?
Yeah, it was. It's massive. Yeah.
Yeah. As you say, quite a lot bigger than where I am right now. Like the whole apartment, never mind the room. So that's great. I know what she should do with that room. She should start showing people around. I think people would pay, especially in Singapore, people would pay a tenner a time to go and see a room of that size. I know I would. But maybe that's not what she wants for a bedroom. I've remembered what my question was from last time, so I'm sure everyone will bear with me while I circle back. Which was, you kindly told us about the things that have changed some of the things that have changed in the industry in your time in it. My follow up question, which I then forgot, was going to be: has that all made things better, or those changes you talked about? Has it made it better or worse for people, or better or worse for you, or is it just different?
Interesting. So post Brexit, things got a lot harder.
Mm,
It was so much harder to get furniture from Europe and fabrics from Europe.
right.
Um, and things take a lot longer. Delivery costs went through the roof. Just that was, and post COVID as well, that had a
And,
definite impact. Delivery costs went from £15 up to £75
wow. Is
for
that just
some
people
things.
being held up at customs and things? Is that all that was?
Yep.
Okay.
And sometimes, well, not sometimes, at the very cusp of when we were making all those changes, if
Yeah.
we were still ordering a desk from an antique supplier in Belgium, you couldn't tell the client the final cost. And you'd have to very clearly tell them, look, it's going to be this or thereabouts, because at the border there will be some charges, and
Mm,
they're still muddling their way through and they don't know how much it's going to be. So just bear in mind, and of course clients don't know, they don't like how, when a piece of string is open-ended, they want to know
yeah.
how much things cost. Fair enough, who doesn't?
Yeah. Right.
um I'd say labor costs have gone through the roof in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Very, very quick change. Things have doubled. I've had quotations for painting works done in my house, and my eyes are on stalk. And I'm in the industry, and I'm just going, "What is happening?" Yeah, that people think that this is not reasonable, and I've ended up going on an electrical course to try and do some first fix work myself.
You're in the wrong business. Better become an electrician. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so expensive to get any works
Mm,
done. The days of having a loft conversion done for, £45,000 are in the past. And if you want a bathroom, you're looking, a loft conversion and a bathroom, 130,000 easily. It's
wow.
shocking. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, the people are not, they're realizing that it's so much more expensive to do any work. So they're a lot slower
Mm,
to make decisions. And that has a
mm,
knock-on impact with the design industry. A lot of my
yeah.
friends and colleagues, they've had projects put on hold, put on hold, put on hold.
Mm,
Things dry up. People who've been, frequent clients have
yeah.
just said, look, we're going to wait for a while and just wait for things to stabilize. The scary thing is, as we all know, things never get cheaper. They only ever go north. So
Mm,
putting things on pause is completely understandable, but it's never going to come down in price, that's the worry.
yeah. No, interesting. Not good interesting from your point of view, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but interesting nonetheless. Um, and so another thing that I read and wanted to ask about was I read an article, and there's the old saying you should never trust a man who's read one book, and I read one article and it was talking about how computer modelling and things on computers now are I sound like my granddad. Have you heard these computers? But the modelling I showed some examples is obviously much more advanced than it used to be, and so
Mm.
in the example it was showing, it was like, they've modelled this room or house or whatever, and it's now showing that if you have the windows here, the daylight in May will do this, and therefore you should have it in green. But if you're going to move the window to here, well then suddenly it's actually a much darker room, and so you should do this with the colours. Does that sort of? I realise it depends on the project. You probably don't need that for the panic room, not least because there's no windows. But as sort of as the as the tech around interior design, is that something you use a lot, or are you
Yes.
more of a more of a shading kind of person? Is that has changed things, and how does that work? How would that impact me if I was to, for example, engage your services?
So, daylight studies are critical for one's own property, but also for the
Mm,
neighbors. Because if you want to do an extension rather higher than above normal or whatnot, and if your neighbor objects, then you are required to do a daylight study to see how much natural daylight you're going to be blocking from the neighbors, whether it's a commercial property or whether it's a residential property. I use Daylight 3D software, and it's super easy to do in SketchUp. Anybody can do it. So if you have a 2D drawing, you can extrude it up into 3D. You can
mm,
plug in the geolocation of the actual the address of the property and the
oh wow,
geolocation.
yeah,
You can say whether it's January or whether it's June. So it'll track the actual accurate sunlight. And I actually do this for my garden design, because when I'm doing garden layouts, I like to
mm,
see I will literally plot out the garden for my garden design clients, and I'll go, right, this is where your sunlight is mostly tracking. So these are the type of plants I want to put here because they'll be successful. But actually, this area is going to be really shaded. So we'll put some ferns and something else that's more shade resilient. And actually, this area of the lawn is north facing and it's on a sloping gradient. So we want some really shade resistant lawn seed there. I know you wouldn't think interior designers would be talking about lawn seed, but
Turns
um,
out, you're an exterior designer as well.
yeah, I do. I love it. It's actually probably a passion of mine. I love gardens. So, but we do, the daylight studies are critical for any development, whether they're commercial, residential, or garden.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. Circling back then to the online sessions that you talked about, the because I can sense, I can sometimes get a sense from my listeners and watchers that and I got this question, and they go, ask them more about the online sessions because they sound good, because I don't have to go anywhere. So
How does it work?
yeah, yeah, we can switch places if you want. Yeah, but how does it work? Yeah, you answer that. Yeah.
Um, there is a page on my website. People
Oh
click
yeah.
book. They go through to my calendar. They choose an appointment that suits them. I get a notification that they've booked the session. I then send them a questionnaire, and it's quite detailed. So I like to ask a lot about the space that they want to discuss, or the room, or the project that they're working on. I ask them to send me through all information that they have. If they don't have floor plans, they shouldn't panic, because I can generally find floor plans online from places like Rightmove or Zoopla or anything like that. There's all manner of information online, and obviously the local councils will have historical drawings most of the time as well. And so if I've got some drawings to work with, because of the way my brain works, I can sort of situate myself quite easily within a 3D mindset, and understand exactly what they want to discuss, what's frustrating them, storage that they can't quite pull off, or they're looking at they want to just approach something from a different angle, or they want to brainstorm something. Last week, was it last week? 2 weeks ago, I had a client who booked in a design hotline because she wanted to discuss front door colors. They've lived in this house for 15 years. It's a Victorian house, and she was going around in circles, and her husband and her couldn't decide on what color they wanted to paint the outside of the house. So we discussed that first, and then we did the front door. And using AI, I was actually able to generate specific colors for the front door based on the elevation of the front of the house. It was facing north, based on the ironmongery, so the letterbox, the knocks and door knocks, locks and whatnot, which were staying, based on the color of the render that we were painting. So we wanted a front door color that would harmonize with the new render. So all sorts of things, and you can whip these up in AI. That took half an hour, I think. Doing 6 options for her, it took half an hour. Just, as I said, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So people normally send me videos, photographs, floor plans, and then we book in a Zoom session, and I will have prepared and reviewed everything in great detail in advance, and then we have a really lively session between me and the client. Oh, and I send them notes afterwards. I forgot about that. I actually send them summarized notes afterwards as well.
I feel invested now, so I have to ask, what colour front door did you go with in the end? Are they still thinking about it?
No, so her existing front door was beautiful turquoise, which was a great color, but it absorbed quite a lot of light because it was on a north elevation. So, and she'd chosen Little Green Paint Company Portland Stone for the external render, which is a really lovely sort of greeny gray color. And it was sympathetic with the neighbors' houses as well. And so I suggested that she go for the beautiful dark purple, which is called Pelt. And it looks stunning. She's ordered samples. So that was 2 weeks ago. She told me she'd ordered samples. So she loved all the colors. She said it was really hard to choose from. So
That's good.
I love a purple
That's
door. Why not?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially if you've been deciding over it for years. It sounds like it's a tricky one to go with something a bit standouty. Okay. Well, I think that's. I'd love to carry on chatting for ages. Probably start winding it up. And with that in mind, I understand that you've kindly put together a 22-page guide for people to enjoy and download, that we'll obviously post with the show notes. Could you tell us a bit about that so that people can get excited?
So I find that property developers work well with interior designers when they understand what they do. And I find that sometimes all it takes is a little bit of conversation and a little bit of education. And,
Mm.
the whole ethos of that we're curtain twitchers and cushion plumpers, put that to one side because I can't tell you that's the last thing that I do. I've specified curtains maybe 3 times in 15 years, and that's not what I get involved with. So I put together a guide called Design That Sells, 20 interiors, do's and don'ts for property developers that will get them looking at things from a more of a psychological point of view about analyzing their ideal client, looking at practical lessons, mistakes that I've seen firsthand, ideas that can really help property developers create homes that people genuinely want to live in.
Well, that sounds amazing. I'm very much looking forward to having a look at it myself. Okay, great. And then we'll of course again post your contact details with the show notes in the normal way. But people are lazy, so if they want to get hold of you or have a look at your website and things, what's the best way to get a hold of you or look at some examples of your work?
My website is really simple, caseyandfox.com. I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on there. So Siobhan Casey, the interior designer, you'll see my lovely face. And on Instagram, yeah, I'm always doing something stupid. So I had a reel go viral 2 weeks ago. Nothing
Okay.
to do with interiors or construction or art or lighting design or anything that I'm particularly passionate about. But I did a little short 7-second video of bumblebees on my street. Tom, it's
Oh wow.
had over 100,000 views.
Jeez.
Bumblebees.
What were they doing? Just buzzing around? Are they? Yeah.
I did it. It was basically I was doing a little video about salvia, all the
Oh,
flowers and plants that bees actually love, so helpful for pollinators and whatnot. And bees love salvia, and the bumblebees. There were about 40 bumblebees circulating this little plant of salvia. So
wow.
it was a happy little thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well,
my
that's
first
great.
viral reel, and it's on bumblebees.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. It's funny, isn't it? What strange what sells. You got to make more Bumblebee videos. Um, well, I think that's an excellent place to end with bumblebees. I've just got a tenant who's reported like bees. They want to get rid of them, so I'm gonna have to be. I've got to get the pest control guy in. But you can tell, I think bumblebees are a protected species, aren't they? So if they are bumblebees, got to check which species it is first. Or is it honeybees
Yeah.
that are protected? I was getting mixed up. One of them's protected, so fortunately, there'll be no bees will be harmed in the making of this podcast.
You get people who remove it. You don't have to get the pest control. You'll get people who will come and physically take them away and move the hive somewhere else.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
What, like just passers by? Who are these people?
I can send you a
Are they specialists?
yeah, they are. Genuinely, they
Okay.
are. They're the sort of beehive or beekeeper. And honestly, they're not afraid of bees at all. They don't even wear the
Mm.
kits. They literally will come and just analyze what needs to be done. Sometimes, look, I've seen some disasters. I had a wall that needed to be opened up, and basically the entire partition had been taken over as a honeycomb,
Oh
essentially, and
wow.
that needed to be taken out. But then the wall was sealed up, and there's nothing to be afraid of or anything. Bees are beautiful and they're friendly. Bumblebees, you could have them on your hand. There's nothing aggressive about them. But
There you go.
look at moving them rather than destroying them.
So I don't want anyone to say we only cover property stuff on here.
No,
It's a broad church here on the
broad,
podcast.
why not?
Absolutely, we like to get around. Um, so huge thanks as always to everyone watching and listening, taking the time. A massive thanks to the lovely Siobhan Casey for taking the time to speak to us today as
Thank
well.
you, Tom.